Today is Thursday, March 14, 2013. My name is John Dittmer, and I'm here in Pickens, Mississippi with videographer John Bishop to interview Mr. Robert Clark, the first African American to be elected to the Mississippi House of Representatives in the 20th century. This interview will become part of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. Representative Clark, we're delighted to be here today, and we thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
It's a pleasure to have both of you here today.
I usually begin the interview by asking the participant to talk about their family, and I'll do that. But I'm going to start this one by asking you to talk about this house that we're in now.
This house, I was born in this house. My father built this house approximately 100 years ago, and this is the only address that I have ever had. I have never left this place.
Tell us about the history of the house and the family.
Well, my great-grandparents were slaves on the same property that we own today. And after slavery, my great-grandfather's former slave master sold him the property. And it has been in the family ever since. And when I was growing up, I felt like I wanted to go to Chicago, like everybody else was doing, leave Mississippi. But after I graduated from 12th grade, my father, who was living here then, and my mother had deceased, and my older aunt, my father said, me and Sister Annie want to see you. Well, I got really afraid. I didn't know what they wanted. So finally, I made my mind up. I said, Daddy, let's go over home and see what you and Sister want. And I drove our old regular car over there, and we got to the gate. I thought I was afraid before, but I really was nervous and was shaking. So when I walked in, she was standing over the stove. Now, I really thought some girl had told a story on me and had said I had impregnated her. Well, I knew that wasn't true. So my father said, Sister Annie, here this boy is. She said, boy, when you go to school and finish, we want you to come back home and take care of the family property. Oh, no, not me. You know, I don't like the country. You know, I can't stand the filth. I put up a strong argument, but my father and my aunt never said a word. So finally, when I had to argue all I could, I said, I don't want to, but if y'all want me to, I will. Oh. And she said, we do. And that's how I wound up coming back home and being on this place where, as I said earlier, my great-grandparents were slaves right on this plantation. This is the plantation where they were slaves.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I had one brother and one sister by my father's first marriage. Then after my mother died, my father married again, and he had another son. But my sister, you know, saw fit to go to the big city and bright lights. She went to California, then Chicago, and she finally wound up, and she's still living in Las Vegas now.
Oh, wow.
But my brother left home to go to school in Memphis High School because we had no high school for African Americans then. High schools was only in the little towns, Durant or Lexington, but you had to board to go to school there. So after my brother went to Yazoo City School for 9th grade, staying with an aunt of ours. He decided to go to Memphis and stay with an uncle of ours and go to high school at Booker T. Washington.
Oh.
So he did, and he never came back home.
Oh, so you were the one.
Yes.
You were the one. I'm going to read you something. A quote. Jack Bass, in his foreword to Melanie Nielsen's book about your campaigns for Congress, begins with this sentence. As an 11-year-old black youth in Holmes County, Robert Clark was jailed with his father, who was arrested on murder charges. The boy was released the next day. A white lawyer in the county seat of Lexington defended the father and won an acquittal on the grounds of self-defense. The year was 1940. Wow, tell us about that.
Well, that is exactly right. I didn't know anything about what was going on, but we know we had lots of law enforcement officials here, and they not only carried me to jail and locked me up overnight, but they carried my brother to jail and locked him up, locked both of us.
Well, tell us what happened. Why were they out here?
Well, they had found an individual dead about a couple of miles from here, not on our property, but off of our property. And they suspicioned that it was my father.
Oh.
But I was so small and young, and I didn't know what was going on.
So he was acquitted.
Yes.
But you spent. Why do you think they put you in jail too?
Well, they not only put me in jail, my other brother. They put us in jail also. I really think they were just trying to intimidate us by putting us in jail. You know, in 1940, at that time, I was 12 years old.
Wow. Well, I assume that most of the time was somewhat calmer than that, though. Tell us what it was like growing up here.
Well, growing up here, we grew up on our own place. And I can truthfully say I never worked on a plantation one day in my life. I never worked in a white man's cotton field one day in my life. But because we grew up on our place, lots of blacks, most of the blacks looked at us as being different. And I've always told them, I'm no different than you. All of us is one and the same. You are just as much as I am. And growing up here, we had to go to school. That was no if and and. School terms may have been 4 months, 5 months. It all depends upon how early you got the cotton out of the field before school would start, because the white man did not want the black children on his plantation leaving the cotton field to go to school. And it all depends in the spring of the year, the temperature. If it got warm, then school closed, because you went to the field and you sprouted and you knocked stalks and what have you. So I grew up with a 4 to 5 month school and grammar school.
Where did you go to school? Where was the school?
I went to school, Cybers Flat. That's 3 miles this way.
How'd you get there?
I had to walk there. Rain, sleet, or snow. We had to walk. And when my aunts taught at a school west of here, Holy City, which was 2.5 miles, we went to school there for 2 years. But we could go through the field and if it didn't rain and get there. But if it rained, we had to go around the road to get there, which was 3.5 miles.
Wow.
But one of the things my mother made sure, that rain, sleet, or snow, that we never missed a day out of school. And since you asked about that, the white children would be riding buses, and they'd come by throwing spitballs out after us. So I, would get off behind my uncle and aunt who were school teachers, and I would get a pocket of gravels. And when they would throw those spitballs off after me, then I'd throw those gravels back after them. But I am proud to say at least 2 of those individuals have come to my house and have sat right here in the same room where we are today, asking me for my help, to help them.
Yeah.
Yes, I helped them. I didn't hold it against them. But I did not to forget to remember. Do you remember when you threw them spitballs off after me?
I bet that made it a little uncomfortable, didn't it?
They just laughed it off.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Was this a one-room schoolhouse? Would you have one teacher or more than one teacher in your school?
It was 2 teachers. 2 teachers.
8th grades?
2 teachers, 8th grade. And that was it. Now, that was high school. I mean, that was grammar school. But after high school, you had to board off from home because there was no buses to get African American children to school.
Now, how far away was the high school from here?
16 miles, Lexington. The next one, 24, Durant. My first year, my uncle became the principal of Mount Olive Vocational High School. That was north of Lexington. My 9th grade year, I stayed there in the teacher's home. But his family was multiplying very, rapidly, and it wasn't enough room for me to stay there. So then, my 10th grade year, I enrolled in the Holmes County Training School, which is now William Sullivan at Durant. But every Monday morning, rain, sleet, or snow, I'd step off that porch, headed to Pickens, just like I'm headed to my car shed, a carport, headed to Pickens to catch that 2 a.m. train to get to Durant.
Wow.
Rain, sleet, or snow.
That is amazing, but also probably most of the kids you knew didn't go to high school, did they?
They didn't go to high school. They did not.
But your parents really were insisting that you were going to go.
They insisted that I was going to go, and after, when I was 3rd or 4th grade, oh yes, if there had not been for them, I would have dropped out of school. But after, I had reached that age, I was determined that I was going to get an education.
So here what did you do? Did you have cattle, hogs, cotton?
We had cattle, we had hogs, we had chickens, we had turkeys, we had geese, and of course we had the horses and mules.
Yeah.
The horses and mules to pull the wagon and to pull the plows. And I started to making a full day in the field when I was 7 years old.
Wow.
Plowed when I was 7 years old. When
You're
I
up in a hurry.
had to reach up for the plow hands. It was over my head. And I can remember them, they'd always give the youngest person what they call their old hag. That's, an older mule or horse. And the old horse that they gave me when I first started, she didn't walk. She just trotted very fast. And I can remember one day when I was plowing, and the plow hit a stump, and the hound went up and hit me under the cheek and knocked me flat on my back.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Oh.
But one thing I knew that we had our farm, but I knew I was not going to farm for a living.
Yeah.
But when I went to college, my aunts was farming. They had never been married. As quick as I get out of college, I would come home and take care of their crops for them. But
How many acres did you have here?
It's 228 acres in the family place.
Oh, that's a good sized plot.
228 acres in the family place. And I have bought 82 acres surrounding the family place, which was originally, all of it was in the family, but some of it had gotten out of the family by some of the individuals dying and their spouses marrying again and got out of the family.
What was religion very important in your life? Education certainly was.
Religion was very, very important. It was very, very important. And frankly speaking, I confessed Christ at 3.5 years old. And individuals asked my mother, said, "Elaine, you going to let that boy join church and be baptized?" She said, "Yes, he knows what he's doing." And honest the truth, if my mother had not allowed me to join church and be baptized, that would have been a tragic mistake. Because that's what I got at 3.5 years old, have carried me thus far.
Where did you go to church?
Pleasant Green. That's a little church about 2 miles from here. A little wooden church. We're trying to rebuild a brick church. The only reason we have not rebuilt because my grandfather, when they built the church, the white folk just let them build on their land, and they built there, but we had no deeds to it, so we can't rebuild there without deeds. So we're going to rebuild the church, Pleasant Green.
So you said, I believe, that you didn't have many experiences with whites growing up, that you were not on a plantation, that you were going to separate schools. Tell us a little bit about what segregation was like in this part of the world. Where did you become aware that there were two different ways of doing things?
Well, my mother always told me and my brother when we would leave here riding our horses going to Ebenezer, every time she would tell us, "So now, you all is just as much as those white boys." She would call their name. She said, "But you can't do this, you can't do that." She said, "It's not right, but that's the law, and that's what you got to do." And I've been knowing, segregation all of my life because since I was large enough, my folk taught me, and I had a grandfather, my father's father, who was a slave in Hinds County, and he was 11 years old at emancipation. And he told me about him never have worn a pair of pants until after slavery. He always wore something like a dress or a gown. But when I got, too large for them to carry me to church at night because I'd go to sleep, and he was too old to walk to church at night, and when I was not large enough to go to the field, and he was too old to go to the field, then they would leave him at home with me. But he told me as a child what slavery was like. and he says, young man, things is going to be better, but young men like you is going to have to grow up and make a difference.
Wow.
So
Wow, you had that from the very beginning.
from the very beginning.
So when you and your brother rode your horses into Ebenezer, what did you find there? What was the town like, and what did you have to be careful about?
Well, you had to be careful about that. You didn't infuriate any white person. You didn't say yes and no to any white person. You made sure you didn't look at a white lady. If she was coming, you turn your head because they may get upset about you looking at her.
Yeah.
And she always told us, and we adhered to what she said, and I always knew, and that's one of the problems that we have today, and that's one of the things I'm going to be spending the rest of my life to work on. Many African Americans don't know who they are. Some African Americans right now, if a child is smart and done well in his books, they'll tell him you're trying to act like you white. See, and that's one of the things that we got to get rid of.
Yeah.
But this is something I have known all of my life, that I was equal to anybody. I'm not as smart as anybody, but I'm equal to anybody.
When you finished high school, then you decided to go on to college, and even fewer blacks were going to college at that point, and you chose Jackson State, which is a good distance from here, but still within the state, within a couple hours drive. But tell us what it was like, your decision to go there, and what was Jackson State like and just after World War II?
First of all, let me tell you, my first choice was Tougaloo because I wanted to be a lawyer. You may have heard of Perry Howard.
Oh, yes.
Perry Howard, I live north of here, between here and Ebenezer, and I always wanted to be a lawyer. And I thought I had to major in pre-law to be a lawyer. And I wanted to enroll at Tougaloo, but I had to be a work-age student. And Tougaloo told me that it would take me 8 years to graduate if I'd be a work-age student. So I decided to go to Jackson College. That's where my father had gone and some of my other folks. And my uncle wanted me to go to Alcorn. That's where my uncle had gone. But I know I didn't want nothing at farming, so I didn't go to Alcorn. So I went over to my aunt's house, one I was telling you about. They gave me, I think, $1.25. I came back by, went down to my Uncle Lewis's house. That's a grand uncle of mine. And he gave me $1.50. So I left here headed to Jackson College. It was Jackson College for Negro teachers at that time, with less than $5 in my pocket. Wow. And I left here walked to Pickens. Walked to Pickens, caught the bus, the Trailway bus, and rode into Jackson. Then I caught the 10 Lynch Mill Street bus and rode out to Jackson College. So when I got out to Jackson College and I got ready to enroll, I told them I want to be a work aide. I want to work my way. I don't have any money. They said it takes money to go to Jackson State. If you ain't got no money, call your folk and tell your folk to come get you. I said, well, my folk don't have a phone. Call a neighbor. Well, it doesn't. Not any of my neighbors have a phone. So they say, we're going to put you up for the night. But if you ain't got no money when you get back here tomorrow, you're going to have to go home. All right, all the other students, who went through Reston, they got the meal tickets. But I went back to the barracks, room 205, where they assigned me. And I stayed there all day, no food. So the next morning, the other kids was getting up, going to the dining hall. But I got up and went to the registrar's office, and I was sitting there reading the paper when the registrar came in. And the registrar said, "You have any money today?" I said, "No, sir, I don't." Said, "Well, we're going to send you down to the president's office." So we went, they sent me down to Dr. Redrick's office. When I walked into his office, he said, "Young man, I understand you're wanting to go to college and don't have no money." I said, "Yes, sir, that's right." "Don't you know it takes money to go to college?" I said, "Yes, sir, I know that." He said, "Well, I tell you what, young man, you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink." He said, "Now, we're going to give you a chance to get an education, but we can't make you get one, but we're going to make sure we bump your heads against the wall." So what he worked out then was I could work with the custodians on the yard for 25 cents an hour. That would pay for half of my tuition. And the other half, I had a job of moving the garbage out of the women's dormitories, 2 women dormitories. And as God would have it to be, I went through that year. And I participated in basketball. All right, I'm a fox hunter, and we have followed the dogs all across the woods at night. And I went out for track, and they asked me, "What do you run?" Well, I didn't know anything about no 220, 440, or anything like that. And I said, "Track." Said, "What do you run?" I said, "Track." I'm saying that because I didn't want to tell them I didn't know. They said, "Well, we're going to see what you run." So then they put me into, started me out, and I outran everybody in everything except the 100-yard dash. So we got the conference championship that year in track. And then, after that year, I was the first person to get a track scholarship at Jackson State University, a full-time track scholarship.
That's a very interesting story about what you had to go through just to be able to be there.
That's right.
What were your favorite subjects? Now you said you wanted to be a lawyer. Was that still your ambition now?
Well, I wanted to be a lawyer, and the dean of students called me in to her office one day, and she pulled her eyeglasses off and leaned over, and she said, "Young man, I see where you want to be a lawyer." I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she put her fingers so close to my nostrils until you couldn't get a strain of cat hair between them. She said, "We are not going to let you use the teaching profession to become a lawyer. And if you want to become a lawyer, you pack your duds and get away from here." Oh. And I went back home, went back to the dormitory, and packed my clothes. She said, "Duds," but they never called me back. And, after they didn't call me back a week or so, I unpacked them and just went on. But I didn't have anyone to tell me that I could have been a lawyer without majoring in pre-law.
So you decided to become a teacher then?
Yes, sir. I decided to become a teacher because that's practically all an African American would do at that time, other than being a janitor or going to the field.
Yeah.
So.
I see here where you left Jackson State before you actually graduated to teach second grade in Durant. And that you graduated in 1963.
1953.
Before you graduated to teach. Did you need the money or you wanted the
No,
experience?
sir. No, sir. Let me tell you what happened. They had done my junior year. They implemented a program in health and physical education. And the dean H.T. Sampson, set up a program for 5 of us. And we could, graduate and get our degree in health and physical education, but we'll have to go back to school that summer. So it was 4 men, 4 males, and 1 lady. And the lady met me on campus one day and said, "Hey, we're going to have to be here for 5 years." I said, "What do you mean we're going to have to be here for 5 years?" She said, "That's what Dean Sampson say." So I went to Dean Sampson's office. I said, "Dean, I have the grade point average. I have passed all of the tests, and I have done everything. I have met all of the requirements that you set up." He said, "Well, Clark, I'm sorry. I can't set up a program for 1 student, but I can set up a program for 5. So when he said that I was going to have to stay there that 5th year, that's when I dropped out of school. See, we were on quarters, and that's when I dropped out of school at the end of the fall quarter. And Mr. Sullivan, where I finished high school, hired me to teach there. So that was the reason that I dropped out. I wasn't going to stay there 5 years, because when you be there, and students that have stayed there, and when they come back on the campus and see you there, when they come back to a basketball game, "Hey, Grandpa, hey, Grandma." But I had not flunked a thing.
No. So you did get your degree then.
I did go back and get my degree there.
In a year later, in 1950, 2 years later, in 2 events. One was the Brown versus Board of Education decision that came down in '54. What was the word around the community then? Was that a lot of publicity nationally about school integration? What was happening here?
The word was segregation now and segregation forever. And that was it. And they did not believe that Brown versus the Board of Education, they did not believe that they was going to have to adhere to it. And any individual that acted in a manner where they believed in that, those individuals was immediately released. For example, over in the Delta, when I was teaching school over at Louise, we had 8-month school. But your first 6 weeks or 2 months would be half days. And then in the spring of the year, your last 2 months or 6 weeks would be half days. Because in the fall of the year, they'd be going home to pick cotton. And in the spring of the year, they'd be going home to go to the field. So when I had taught over at Louise for 7 years, the superintendent of education sent for me to come to his office one afternoon after school. And I went to his office and said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Brown, I understand you want to see me." He said, "Yes, I heard that you said it would be all right for white children and black children to go to school together." I said, "Yes, sir, Mr. Brown, I did say that." And I said that the white parent need to explain to their children that it's fine, and the black parent need to explain to their children that is fine. He said, you really believe that, huh? I said, yes, sir. He got up, put his hat on, walked out of his office, and left me sitting in his office. But at the end of the school term, I got a message that I was no longer needed in the school system.
So just because you said that, you were fired.
Just because.
This was a tough time because the next year in 1955, Emmett Till was murdered. Talk about your recollections of that and how you felt.
Well, I knew it was wrong. During the time when Emmett Till was murdered, I was, a high school official and a college official also. We were at the fall conference getting ready for the workshop for the Southwestern Athletic Conference when he got killed. But I was not a bit surprised. But one of the things, some of the things that happened in Louise, around Louise after I left, I was glad that the superintendent did fire me because some of the things that had happened to some of the other folk had been put in lakes and etc. And I was, glad it did not happen to me. But at the same time, when that happened to me, there was 3 gentlemen came to see me. One gentleman was just a parent, quiet. You wouldn't think he, never say a word if you don't say anything to him. The other gentleman had students going to school there, and his wife also taught there. And the other gentleman was a preacher, but he was a non-passing preacher. They came to see me. And that preacher told me, said, I understand the superintendent don't want you. He said, you don't have to go nowhere. You ain't teaching a damn one of his kids. I said, well, if he doesn't want me, I don't want to stay here. He said, but you ain't teaching his kids. But God put on my heart to go ahead and stay and to not fight it. And I was glad that I did.
Well, I see in the 50s you taught for 7 years at the Humphreys County Training School in the Delta. Is that correct?
That was the Humphreys County Training School in the Delta. And while I was at the Humphreys County Training School in the Delta, I think the year was 1956, I believe it was, 56 or 57, when we were getting ready for baccalaureate services. We went into Belzoni, me and another black instructor, to get our hair trimmed that night. And when I got up out of the chair, Reverend Lee took my seat. He was sitting there waiting next. And when we got to the baccalaureate services next morning, we had a young lady that lived in Belzoni going to our school, and she broke the news to us that Reverend Lee had been killed. Had been shot about 2 houses from the barber shop.
Oh. And he was shot because he was starting to ask people to register and vote.
Because he was asking people to register to vote. And that's why he was shot and killed. And it is my understanding that some of the individuals that may have known something about it, that their boss man gave them money to send them away from here.
Yeah. About that time, the Citizens Council had formed too, in opposition to the Brown decision. Was that the White Citizens Council? Was that a presence in your area? Were you aware of what they were doing, and did they try to interfere in anything that you were doing?
Yes, sir. I was very much aware. The Citizens Council was ruling things then. Not the legislature and not the governor, but it was the citizen council ruling things. And I happened to see in the, they had the Soviet Commission. I happened to see in that report some years later that superintendent of Humphreys County reported to the Soviet Commission that I have gotten rid of all of the troublemakers. And I assume I was one of those troublemakers that he was talking about.
Yes.
And another thing, this is not, not talking about me. My father was a school teacher. He was fired in Holmes County because he was teaching voter registration classes. All right, he went to Madison County and taught at Madison, a Rosenwald School, principal there, for 2 years. And then he was fired there. And he could not get another job in Mississippi. See what they would do? They would take your name and give your name to the Sovereign Commission. That Sovereign Commission would send those names to all of the superintendents of education.
We should probably say here that the Sovereignty Commission was an agency appointed by the state, and it was really a secret police, wasn't it?
That's right.
And they had files on practically everybody.
That's right.
So it was really dangerous to be a teacher and to say anything that went against the white supremacist system.
Well, they most teachers, lots of teachers, allow their manhood or personhood to be taken from them. Yeah. But never was I going to allow my manhood or my personhood to be taken from me. For example, over at Louise, when we got our first set of new books in the library, he sent word down. I was assistant principal. For there is a book in the library with the picture of a black rabbit and a white rabbit on the back of it. And for me to pull that book and bring it to his office immediately. So if black children see that, they will get the idea that they supposed to play with white children. And I sent word back to the superintendent, if you want that damn book pulled, you'll have to come down here and pull it yourself.
You kept your job.
No, I guess that led up to my termination, which was fine. Mm-hmm.
So it was just very difficult. Your father and you and probably others who dared say what you meant and what you believed were likely to get in trouble and pay for it.
Yes, sir. And I remember my granddaddy, what I was talking about, when I was small, he'd get up at the church and be telling folk about they should register to vote and do this and that and the other. And I'd see folk walking out. I was about 3 or 4 years old. Old man Clark gonna get somebody killed. And I was wondering, ain't no white folk here, how they gonna know it? Yeah. But I didn't know at that time that folk go back and tell white folk everything.
The Sovereignty Commission had black agents.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. At some point, when did you go to Michigan State for your master's? And talk about what it was like.
Can we hold one second?
No.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're back on.
Okay.
Okay. I had been taught all of my life, and psychology books had taught me that blacks are equal to whites. Ability is not given to race, creed, or color. And most of the blacks at that time was going to Tuskegee. All right, and as you said a few minutes ago, lots of them was flocking to Indiana. But I wanted to go to a place where I wanted to make sure to see if I measured up, if I really was equal. So I chose 3 schools. I chose Michigan State, I chose Notre Dame, and I chose the University of California. The University of California was so far because I didn't have money to get out there. I'd have to go to Jackson and make loans on furniture I didn't have in my house. And Notre Dame taught too much religion. You know, I'm a Christian. I wasn't against religion, but religion wasn't what I wanted. So then that left Michigan State. So I went to Michigan State. And
I guess we should point out here that there was no place in Mississippi where you could get a master's degree.
there was no place in Mississippi I could go to get a master's degree. I had to leave the state of Mississippi to get the master's degree. They would pay, the state would pay the difference for you to go there and get a degree. And during my last year at Michigan State, one of the professors at Jackson State asked me about coming back there. And I told him, no, I'm going to go ahead and finish my work at Michigan State. He said, oh, you think they better than we are? I said, no, sir, Doc, that's not it. But I really wanted to see if I measured up to white folk or not. I want to see. I've been taught that all of my life.
Well, they
So-
asked you to teach in an all-white school. Talk about that and the decision you made there. Mackinac Island.
Yeah, at the Mackinac Islands, I was offered a job up there to integrate the system up there, and he thought that I had been accustomed to integration and that I could stand it better. And I first accepted the job, but after thinking about it, I called him and told him that I was not going to accept the job. And let me tell you about my first class at Michigan State University. Class of, I think, about 35. I was the only African American in the class. And the professor asked a question. I can't remember what the question is, but I remember that question from maybe my sophomore year at Jackson State. But I was too nervous to raise my hand. One guy from the West Coast raised his hand and asked a question. I knew he was wrong. The professor said no. A guy from the East Coast raised his hand, asked a question. I knew he was wrong, but the professor said no. By that time, my little shaking hand had gotten up, and I answered the question. And he said, sir, you're correct. And from that day until this one, I have had no fear. And that's why it did not bug me when I went to the House of Representatives, 122 members, 121 of them white. That's why it didn't bug me one bit.
So it was good that you got away
Yes, sir.
and saw what the competition was like.
That's right.
Then you came back. You turned down that job, and from 1961 to 66, you taught and coached at Lexington High School back in Holmes County. And that was the period when the civil rights movement really got underway here. Tell us what you remember about those years, both in terms of your teaching and in terms of what was going on in the community.
Well, I was teaching during that time, and I do remember when the milestone 14 have Mr. McLean sent me uptown that day.
This was when they decided to try to register.
Yeah, when they decided to try to register. And I might reiterate here that my father and one other man, black man, were the last two names, black names, that they had raised off the books because they didn't raise theirs off. And then when I found out about the civil rights movement, I really didn't know about it. And when I first tried to become a part of it, some of the blacks thought that the white folk were sending me to spy on them. And I really got into the movement through Henry and Sue. When I, went to meet Henry and Sue and talk to them.
Okay, now we should probably point out these are the Lorenzis. These were
Yeah.
a white couple who came
That's
to
right.
Holmes County in the fall of 1964. Okay.
That's right. And Henry and Sue, accepted me, and then they gradually accepted me. But they thought I was coming for, to get the message and carry back to the white folk.
Well, it was and when you were teaching at that time, were any of your students actively involved? Did they see the civil rights movement as something they wanted to do?
Oh yes, sir. Yes, sir. I had quite a few students actually involved. One young man, Walter Pitchford, he was one of my football players. He went down, they punched him in his side, and he had to miss spring practice for about 2 weeks. And we had, quite a few students that was involved.
We had the Freedom Summer here in 1964, where a lot of students came down from the north. Many of them were white, and about 30 of them were in Holmes County. Do you remember Freedom Summer and the challenge of the Freedom Democratic Party?
Yes, sir. I do remember the Freedom Summer and the challenge of the Freedom Democratic Party in 1964. But I was proud to be a part of the challenge in 1968.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the legislature passed an act allowing counties to have an adult education program. And I went to my superintendent and asked him if he would implement an adult education program, because I knew many of the parents were not able to help their students with the lesson, and that would be better for the students. Well, he said, no, I don't think it's in the best interest of the county to do that. I said, well, may I come before the board? He said, you can come before the board, but don't bring no drove. So I got two individuals to go with me. I got Mr. LaPlace Polk, who was a social science teacher down at Schuler, that's Marshall High School now. I got Mr. Curtis Lodge, who was a social science teacher over at Durant, which is William Sullivan, and we went. And I explained to the board what I wanted. And the board says, we will have an adult education program when the superintendent asks for one. I said, you mean if the superintendent asks for one, you will have one? They say, well, that's correct. I said, well, next year you will implement an adult education program, because I'm declaring my candidacy for superintendent right now. So it was needless to say that at the end of the year, I got a message, that my contract was not renewed.
We're out again.
Out again.
Oh.
All right. Then the legislature was in session. We had two legislators. Now, I'm running for superintendent of education, but they get a local and private pass. Now, the local and private, eventually, it has been ruled unconstitutional. You can't do it now. But they draw up legislations like in a county where Highway 12 and Highway 17 intersect may appoint their superintendent.
Yes, yes.
And when they drew that up and got that passed, and I could not run for superintendent of education, and that's why I ran for the legislature.
Oh, that is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to that, there's something I really want to ask you, because in 1965, the Holmes County schools were forced to desegregate, the white schools. How did that affect you and your students, and how did that play out over the next couple of years? Was it successful? Did black students go to white schools? Did whites stay? What happened?
No white students went to black schools. Some of the students had to pay the price, and they had to pay a hell of a price.
Talk about that.
One of the things we was talking about last night, yesterday evening, planning for the civil rights celebration that we're having, we were talking about that. One young lady that went to school there, she later went to school to me after I got fired when I was teaching over at Saints. But she says, Mr. Clark, you don't know how cruel it was. She said, I never will be the same again. And it really had a heck of an impact on that particular young lady.
What did she have to face in an all-white school?
Well, she just said it was cruel.
Mm-hmm.
And, they was not treated like they were human beings.
Yeah.
And I remember over at Durant, one young lady who lived in a rural area, Miss Georgia Clark's daughter, the superintendent suspended her from school one day, and she 8 miles from home. But we gave him all kinds of trouble about just putting that young lady out.
Yeah.
And I don't think he ever did that again.
Yeah. From 1966 to 67, you worked for Dr. Aurelia Mallory as Director of Adult Education at Saints Junior College in Lexington. Tell us about Dr. Mallory and Saints and your time there.
Well, the superintendent, fired me. Okay, that was good. It really was the superintendent. That was God in God's plan, because I wanted an adult education program, right? When I started working for Dr. Reconstruction Mallory, she had 300 adults coming in 6 days a week, 4 o'clock from Monday, 4 to 9, from Mondays through Friday.
Wow.
And then on Saturdays, they'd come in for vocation from 9 until 12. So when I went over there, she started me out as the coordinator of the program. Then within about 3 months, I was made director of the program. So that was God's way of moving me and putting me in charge of those adults. And we had adult education programs on St. Junior College campus. We had some at the church in Lexington, Asia. We had a class in Pickens. We had a class in West. And we had a class in Chula also. And one of the things about that, when I ran against J.P. Love and won, J.P. Love, one of his challenges was that I had forged signatures. So because that's one of my hands on that his name is there. And I know he can't read and write. But what Mr. Love did not know, that he had gone to the adult school that I was heading, and they had taught him how to read and write.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I
And-
wonder if we could take a short break here.
We're rolling.
There were a lot of political developments going on in the mid-60s. One of them was Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. And out of that came the idea of the community action boards, the CAP boards, that were supposed to be composed of local people who would be implementing various government and other programs. And you were briefly a member of that CAP board in 1966. Talk about your experience there.
Yes, I was a member of the CAP board, and frankly speaking, that's when we had the first integrated meeting in the county at the courthouse, when we had blacks and whites sitting around the table. That's when we became a part of Central Mississippi Incorporated. And we were fortunate and to get two white men to sit around the table with us. Let me get off point a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
You can get me back on point. But one of the things that I remember most about that night, I guess maybe 100 gallons of water was drinking out of that fountain that night by black folk, because they had never been able to drink out of that fountain before.
Did the water taste any different? So that was the first integrated meeting.
That was the first integrated meeting.
But I heard that you weren't entirely happy with what the direction of that board. Is that true?
I'm not at all happy with the direction where the board going now. I see the civil rights movement that started in Holmes County. We always said the cause is more important than any individual. And we're supposed to be working for the cause and not working for ourselves. We're not supposed to develop an idea and say, I want to do this, and it's going to be done my way or no way. And if individuals, cannot reach a compromise, and frankly speaking, I got a letter drafted now that I have not had typed up yet, that is going to come from me and the Freedom Democratic Party of Holmes County. And it's going to be calling on individuals, elected officials in Holmes County. You either do your job. If you can't do your job, then you need to resign. Wow. You need to resign. And the CAP program, it went well for a number of years. First of all, it started out as a social program to get small children used to being away from home from mama before he or she went to school, and he wouldn't be at school crying for mama. Then it gave individuals jobs who had never had jobs before. But one of the things I did when I was over at Saints with Dr. Mallory, had her approval, of course. We, with Russ College, developed a joint program to have night school for those Head Start teachers, because I wanted those Head Start teachers to do more than just go there and babysit and play. But, that should have been done statewide, but it was just done on a small scale. Now, the thing, the Great Society that Lyndon Johnson started, particularly with the Head Start program. If I am one thing, I know I am an educator. It may have been some time since I was in school, but I know I am an educator. And Head Start needs to be a pre-K school, a pre-K program, because children starting to school, first grade, and can't read, don't know his letters. He or she is starting off behind, and they're going to always be behind. They ain't never going to catch up, very seldom.
You had mentioned that you were going to run for county superintendent, and then they made that temporarily, at least, an appointed office. So you decided to run for the state legislature, and I want us to turn to that now because this was a historic event. And were you approached about running? Did you volunteer? How did you get into the race?
I volunteered to run. I volunteered to run. You know, I was an educator, and that's what I had wanted to be all of my life. And after, you know, I couldn't be superintendent, then after they changed that law, I ran against them out of spite.
Would you consider running for a political office?
Well, by this time, the Voting Rights Act had been passed, and there were a lot of blacks on the voting rolls in Holmes County. But still, there are lots of counties where blacks are in a majority, and yet that election, you were the only one to win a legislative seat. How did you campaign? How come you were effective and others weren't?
Well, one of the things, I present myself to individuals in a manner to let them know that I am one of you. I'm not no big IOU or somebody. And then the next thing was the strong civil rights movement we had in Holmes County. And then the next thing was I got a chance to have contact with those 300 plus adults that was coming to the migrant farmer school. For example, if one was coming in, you know, leave the field and heading there and have a flat, and he would get there, supposed to be there at 4 o'clock, and he'd get there at 5 o'clock, and the teachers giving him the devil, I wouldn't allow the teacher to do it. I'd allow the teacher to do it. You know, let's compliment him for getting here at all. See, those are poor folk. And definitely, those 300 plus black folk that I got a chance to be the director of, they was a part of the group that helped put me over. Plus the fact, the strong civil rights movement that we had, and many of the parents, when I taught at Lexington, many of the parents had heard their children talk about me, and they knew the kind of person that I was.
You certainly had a strong reputation. Tell us about your opponent and the tactics of that campaign.
Well, I ran as an independent.
Now tell us why you didn't run in you all decided not to run in the Democratic primary, but to run as independents in the fall.
Well,
why did you do that?
we could not be members of the Democratic Party. We could not be members of the Democratic Party. However, I decided, you know, to run once, because individuals never been to the poll before. You know, they may get tired of coming out. So just take it one shot. So we decided to run as independents. All right. J.P. Love and Wilburn Hooker, they had 2 representatives from Holmes County before. But the federal government had intervened and they had to redistrict, and they had one district. So J.P. Love and Ed Whippen Hooker ran against each other
In the primary.
in the primary, and J.P. Love won, and that's who I met in the general election. And he's the one that I mentioned to you a few minutes ago that contested the election. He contested all the way in front of speaking. I didn't know until 15 minutes before I was seated that I was going to be seated. Marion Wright was my lead lawyer, but he contested all the way.
Were there any tactics of intimidation during that campaign? Were blacks free to vote at the polls, or were they being questioned? We see a lot of that going on now. You certainly got the vote out. You got the vote out.
Well, in 1967, the blacks didn't allow other blacks to be afraid or be intimidated because they was there, and we had not official poll watchers, but we had watchers or guards, as we would call them, at every precinct, at every voting place. And they knew that they was going to be protected if they came to the polls.
Yeah. And that didn't happen in some other counties.
Pardon?
That did not happen in some other counties.
Oh,
where
yes.
blacks were intimidated.
Yes, I know.
Kept from voting.
Mm-hmm.
So you won the election, and it must have been quite a party that night.
Yes, I won the election. The first night, that we had, the first time I ran, I was running behind. All right. And Kruger had not come in.
Kruger is precinct?
Kruger and Durant. Kruger, that's John in the LaFleur County line and the northwestern part of Holmes County. Well, I knew the votes I was going to get in Kruger. I knew those votes. And I was counting those votes. And that wasn't enough to put me over. But lo and behold, when Durant came in, I won Durant, and that put me over. And that's because of, you say you visited, we call him Junebug Bruce.
Yes.
And all his gang over there.
Really organized.
That's right. That's right. And I was trailing until Durant came in. And when Durant came in, it put me over top.
Well, you mentioned that usually you're elected to the legislature and you go in and you take your seat. It wasn't that easy, was it?
No, sir.
Talk about the first day where people were being sworn in. What do you remember about that?
Well, we went through quite a few lawsuits, and Marion Wright was my lead lawyer. And the first day, I didn't know if I would be seated or not until 15 minutes before I was seated. When Marion Wright came back on the outside, where I was on the south side of the Capitol, and told me, Robert, they have decided to seat you. And then when I went in, again, because of my experience at Michigan State and Western Michigan University, being one black among 121 whites, that did not intimidate me at all, because I knew what I knew. And one thing that I knew, what I was going to zero in on was what I was an expert in, and that was education. And I knew no one there knew as much about education as I did.
But you had to wait a while. You were I think for about 8 years, you were the only black in the legislature.
Yes, I was the only black in the legislature. And when I went in, that first day, the regulations of the House was, you had districts, and the senior person in that district would choose the seating for the rest of the members in his or her district. So on this side, where I'm sitting now, that's the door where you come in, right in front of me. That's the door. All right. And this first line was 2 seats. All right. And then aisle come between us, and that's 3 seats. So the old gentleman that was the senior of my delegation, he chose this seat for me. This seat for me. Then his seat is across the aisle from me. Then my other member from my other district, his seat across the aisle from me. All right. Now the vacant seat is for the Speaker of the House, whenever the Speaker of the House is not presiding.
Yeah.
But the Speaker of the House had him another seat moved to the back of the Capitol.
Now, this was Buddy Newman?
No, that wasn't Buddy Newman. That was John Junkin.
Oh, okay.
That was John Junkin. John Junkin. And
So you were
I
separate but equal.
I sat in that seat by myself without an opponent for 8 years before someone finally sat beside me.
Well, tell us a little bit about those early, well, the first and second terms. Were you excluded from everything? You were determined that you were going to be a good legislator. How did that work out with all of the prejudice?
Well, first of all, I couldn't get the floor of the House. If I stand for recognition, somebody make a motion, I'm already standing. You're supposed to, Robert Rules of Order,
Yeah.
but he'd recognize somebody else to cut me out, and I couldn't get the floor. So one night, this was my first time, I walked out, and Bill Minor, you know who Bill Minor is.
Very, very courageous correspondent.
Yes, and Butch Lambert, they came out. I had cleaned my desk out and had everything. And they came out and coming after me, and I pushed them out of my way. And I reached for my door. And by that time, Bill Minor said, okay, go ahead and do it. You're doing what they want you to do.
You were just ready to walk out.
I was ready to walk out. And when Bill Minor said, you're doing what they want you to do, and when he said that, I dropped my hand and walked back in. And when I walked back in on the floor of the House, man, they was having a hooray. They was wolf whistling, they was clapping, and they was doing everything. And when I walked back in, they got just as quiet as
They thought they'd won.
That's right. But what I did when I first went to the legislature, I had been to school, and that helped me. I prepared myself on what legislation was coming up and what I was going to argue on. Sometime I did just like I did at Michigan State or Western Michigan, sitting there burning midnight oil. So I would be prepared. And if they didn't agree with me, they knew that they couldn't say I was wrong, that I knew what I was talking
How
about.
long was it before somebody asked you for your vote?
Maybe about 8 years.
Really?
Maybe about 8 years.
It took that long?
Yes, sir. And after 8 years, we got the group in Jackson elected. Fred
These
Bank.
are group of black elected officials to join you in the state legislature.
Yes, sir. You got 3 from Jackson elected. They did redistricting and got them reelected. But after some of those issues, I would speak out on them, some of the technical issues, and I could present myself on them. And some of those same elderly white gentlemen that, was opposed to me being seated. Now, some folks say I was being an Uncle Tom for doing it, but sometimes they wouldn't know what's going on. And when time came to vote, they'd be jumping up trying to get my attention. And if he's supposed to vote aye, I'd tell him aye. If he's supposed to vote no, I'd point to my nostrils.
These are your younger colleagues in the well.
Now, these are some of the older white gentlemen.
I see. So that's a big change.
They're older white gentlemen. That's why some of the black folk was telling me that, I was being an Uncle Tom, but I didn't do them like they did me.
Yeah.
Particularly if somebody come up like the gentleman from Vicksburg was real sharp, the gentleman from Biloxi, real sharp, gentleman from Greenville, real sharp. And if they had something and they didn't know, they'd look to me for me to direct them. But the truth is, I never directed one in the wrong manner. And the first seatmate that I had, was white seatmate. Then when it come up that he'd ask me, how am I supposed to vote? If he's supposed to vote no, I said, you're supposed to vote no. And then finally he asked me, he said, I want to ask you one thing. What you trying to do? Get me defeated? I said, what you talking about? You telling me to vote one way and you voting another. I said, hell, man, I'm trying to tell you how to vote how your folk back home want you to vote.
Well, about 10 years after you were first elected, you were appointed chairman of the House Education Committee. How did that happen? I mean, here nobody would talk to you, and now you were in chair of an important committee. Tell us what had to happen before that could happen.
All right, that is very interesting. That is very interesting. When C.B. Butter Newman was running for Speaker Pro Tem to fill in for John Junkins, when John Junkins got sick. John Junkins was the speaker. So Butter Newman met me on the first floor of the Capitol. I had been following a group of so-called liberals, my good friends, but they'd all get good appointments and I'd wind up with nothing. So Butter Newman asked me, met me on the first floor, and he said, I need one more signature and I will have a majority. And can I get you to sign it? I said, let me see it. And I looked at it and I saw he needed one more. And I was thinking about all these years, I'm not following my other boys that's I've been following and they get appointments and I don't get nothing. I'm gonna look out for myself. So I saw that I signed it, and when I signed it, he dropped to one knee and he said, he dropped to one knee and he kissed that pen that I signed it with. And he said, whoever thought that a white man would be on his knees to a nigger? And I said, Mr. Speaker, you Peckerwood's gonna have to do a lot more of that for black folk in the future.
And Buddy Newman was the segregation.
And Buddy Newman. And I signed that. All right, then.
Some flack for that.
Then Bud and I, became where we could communicate. We could communicate to each other, with each other. And then after Junkins died, Buddy became Speaker. I wanted Buddy to appoint me as chairman of Wildlife and Fisheries. He said, no, I got something else for you, better than that. So he appointed me vice chairman of education. Okay, all right. President Carter was elected, and George Rogers, who was the chairperson, he was appointed to President Carter's cabinet. All right, Aaron Henry was convening the state NAACP convention in Vicksburg, and that's in Bettanuma District. He lived in Essequibo County, but his district was Vicksburg. So I went, Aaron invited me to be the keynote speaker. And I spoke and I told black folk, it's time for you to get up and do something for yourself. Don't sit around and wait for white folk to be giving you a handout. Get up and do something for yourself. Lo and behold, the next day in the paper in bold headline, potential Negro chairman gives Black Power speech. So, so I just knew it was all over.
Yeah.
So about 10 days, Buddy Newman sent for me to come to his office. So when I went to his office, he had 3 boxes about that high sitting on his desk. And he opened one of the boxes and pulled one of the papers out and said, take that, look at that. I want you to see that. I looked at it. I said, well, yes, sir, Mr. Speaker. I did. I gave the speech. I said it. He says, what I call you in here to tell you that there ain't no vacancy yet. But when there is a vacancy, I will appoint you. And that really changed my attitude towards him, with him having the pride to override all those folk in his district and to do that.
Well, that's, that was something that I think that and that you did what you had to do to become chair of the Education Committee, and as a result of that, you were responsible for, along with others, for pushing through one of the most important pieces of legislation in I think, a long, long time, and that was the Education Reform Act. Tell us about, William Winter, I think, was governor then. Tell us about that debate and what the act did for the state.
All right, as we get into that, before that, a white lawyer from Lexington would have to call me and tell me what's coming up on the floor important. I wouldn't know. So I was trying to get on the inside. I went to the legislature as an education legislator, and I had been pushing for education, progressive education. First bill I introduced when I went to Dr. King's funeral in Atlanta, they called the bill up and killed it that day. All right, then after Governor William Winter became governor, which was great. And then we worked out a bill with him, and we put together a bill, education reform, as we call it. And I would make sure that I would get my bills out first. The bills come out and be on the calendar according to how they come out of the committee. But the Rules Committee had the authority at that time to rearrange the bill, the calendar, and they could kick the bill to the heel of the committee. So I met in '82, had meetings before we went into session, and we got our bill out the first week in the session. All right, then they constantly kicked the bill back to the heel of the calendar. Kick it back to the heel of the calendar. So getting near the end of the session, I got my vice chairman, who was a white person, and another individual who was a very conservative, but he's a white person, but he supported it. And we went to the Speaker's office. I said, Mr. Speaker, I came to your office to let you know that I'm going to call this bill, I gave the number of the bill, up for immediate consideration. He says, I hope you wouldn't do that. I said, well, the time have arrived, Mr. Speaker, for us to do that. And he said, some of these boys can't stand the heat. I said, Mr. Speaker, there ain't supposed to be no boys on the floor of the House. And if there's any boys, they supposed to go home. And I shook his hand, and I said, I'm going to make the motion. He says, I'm not going to recognize you. I said, thank you. Then my vice chairman said the same thing. He said, Mr. Speaker, if you don't recognize him, I'm going to make the motion. So then we went to the floor of the House, and as we began to, convene, at the proper time I stood, made the motion. What does the gentleman from home wish to be recognized for? Mr. Speaker, to call House Bill such and such a number up to the top of the calendar for immediate consideration. Wrap together. You're out of order. You're not recognized. And then my vice chairman did the same thing. All right, and he did the same thing to him. All right, then the House got in such an uproar until they just had to adjourn. But during that same time, I was seeing letters that one of my colleagues from Cleveland, Mississippi had brought, white colleague, what we're going to do to your wife and your family if you vote for that bill. I had seen a letter from one of my colleagues in Yazoo City, what we're going to do to your wife and family. I had seen a letter from one of my colleagues out in West Jackson, out in Clinton. That's where he's really from, Clinton. That's what we're going to do to your wife and family.
Now, who was writing these letters? And these were letters to people who were supporting the education?
Letters to people on my committee who were supporting it. These would be from people back in their home, telling them what they're going to do to their family. But they didn't have no names on them. They didn't have any names on them. So then at the end of that session, I went to Governor William Winter's office. I said, Governor Winter, I said, if we can't get some kind of support, I don't know if I can keep on putting my members through this bloodbath again. And he said, what we need to do? I said, you need to take it to the people. I said, you need to take it to some of the old line organizations, like the Mississippi Southern Baptist, like the Farm Bureau. And he and we had that conversation. And that was the only conversation me and him had. So when I was campaigning for Congress in '82, and I attempted to go to his meeting he was having in Greenville at the Convention and Visitors Bureau, but I couldn't get within 3 blocks of that convention center. It was so many folks there. So after he had those meetings, he summoned 6 legislators, 3 members of the House and 3 members of the Senate to the mansion, governor's mansion. And he says, I'm not calling y'all here to ask y'all if I should call a special session or not. He said, but I'm calling y'all here to let y'all know I'm going to have a press conference. He gave a date. And at that time, I will announce if I will call a special session or not. So that was the essence of that meeting. So sure enough, Governor Winter call the special session. All right. The Speaker, Mr. Speaker, summoned the same three legislators, members of the House, to the Lieutenant Governor's office, and the Lieutenant Governor summoned the same three members of the Senate that had met with the governor. And they had a discussion, and their discussion was constitutionally, if he calls a session, constitutionally, we got to convene. But the consensus was, among them, we don't have to do anything. So finally, Mr. Speaker said to me, he said, Mr. Chairman, you mighty silent over there. What you got to say about this? I said, I'm talking to Betty Newman now. Mr. Speaker, I serve at your will and pleasure. And if you have not removed me when the governor calls a special session, I'm going to do everything I can to get a bill out of that House, out of the committee, and get it passed. And I turned to the Lieutenant Governor. I said, Mr. Governor, and it's going to look mighty bad if I send a bill over there, and it ain't nobody over there but the news media and empty chairs. So that was it. And he did not remove me. And as the bill, there was a section in the bill what I didn't want in the taxes. All right. And then after bills passed both houses, we met in the Education Committee room. That's the conference committee. Well, if you meet on the Senate side conference, the chairman of Senate Education Committee chair, the House chair that. So I was chairing the conference committee room meeting. I call it to order. So Senator Ellis Bodron, blind senator, but smart as he could be, you know who he is. He said, Mr. Chairman, gentleman from Warren, I suggest that we go around the table and see what parameters we are going to work within, what we are going to take and what we're not going to take. And I suggest we start with you. Now, I hadn't thought, not one bit. I'm just thinking, I will not accept any taxes, and I went on to give my speech. And he says, what about 1 cent? I said, I think I will not accept any taxes. What about 1/2%? I think the gentleman from Warren is very smart, and I think he knows 1/2 is taxes. Then I realized what I had done. I had put myself into a jam. So we stayed tied up for 3 weeks. They was trying to kill the bill. Now, Mr. Speaker, first time he ever did this, he put the chairman of Ways and Means on there because it was money. He always do that. Okay, that's good. But then he put somebody on there who was opposed to it. That's a gentleman from Grenada. So he was trying to stack the committee on us. So after we had met and met and met for 3 weeks, then Mr. Speaker, Betty Newman, says when you meet a long time on legislation like that, you have a tendency to kill it. If you want your bad bill, you better go ahead and try to work some way to get it out. But what I did not do, what I did, I still held out for no taxes. But I got with one of the senators, and I worked out a plan with one of the senators and let the senator present that to the committee, and let the senator give a speech on that like he is talking to me. Now, I done worked this out, and I give it to the senator.
Now, why didn't you want taxes? I mean, this is a program.
Pardon?
Why didn't you want to raise taxes?
Well, at that time, I felt that we had the money to do it, and taxes was just a way to kill it. And if we was, money for everything else, why we can't have money for education?
Now,
No,
tell us
simpler.
just what that bill did when it became law.
Well, it compulsory school attendance.
Now, that bill had been repealed around the time of the Brown decision, of that law. There used to be compulsory attendance,
Yes, sir.
and then school integration came along, and so there was Mississippi. I think was the only state in the union without a compulsory attendance.
They was the only state in the nation without a compulsory school law. We were the maybe the first state to pass one and the first state to repeal it. I think we first passed one in 1924, if my memory serves me correctly.
And what else did the new bill do?
Early childhood education.
So it was kindergarten.
Yeah, kindergarten. And
It was a bill that you told us how difficult it was to get passed, but just tremendously important in terms of where the state was going, and as the education person on the committee in the legislature, why you were instrumental in making it happen.
well, yes, sir. It was my attention. I had not, for example, one time before Governor Winter, they would education committee, 31 individuals. I was not chairman then, but they would get up and leave so to make sure we wouldn't have a majority. But what I did, I had my individuals, some in the cloakroom, some in the closet, some in the bathroom, and they were counting, and when they got up and left, I went and knocked on the doors. And when I knocked on the doors, they came back, we had a majority.
Oh, wow.
And,
Politicking.
and I moved that we would bring the bill to the top of the calendar for immediate consideration. I was not chairman then, somebody else was chairman, for immediate consideration. And they looked around and said, well, you got a majority, Jess, you're going to have to carry it. So we got it out of the committee, and that was it. But one individual came back to the committee room the other day when he found out that bill had been called. He got up on that table and he walked down that table stomping and screaming just because that bill had been brought out of the committee.
That's marvelous. Well, thank you so much for going into this detail. This is important for the historical record. We kept you long enough, but I can't let you go without asking you about your two campaigns for the for Congress, for the U.S. House of Representatives. What made you decide to run for Congress, and talk us a little bit about those campaigns?
Well, the reason I decided to run for Congress, I wanted to direct Washington's attention away from the way it had been directed down through the years. For example, you go through Louisiana and Texas and you can see those plants and et cetera there that was built by the federal government. I was going to be for the farmers. I was going to fight for the farmers. But I was not going to go with the mentality that nothing can come to the Delta that will hinder farming.
I should probably point out that Delta planters have historically had a lot of political power in this state.
They had political power. The most political, two of my friends, I got a chance to meet both of them and campaign on the stump with Senator John Stennis in '82. And they both was my friends. Jim Eastland, I got to know him. He was my friend.
I think people, because of what has happened, it's hard for people to realize that when you were running for Congress back then, there were a lot of important Democrats elected to office and that they supported you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And when I ran for office, we did not have the districts that we have now. My district ran from down in Port Gibson all the way over to Webster County, all the way up and over to Webster County. And then even with that district, another thing that we found out when we did a study of the election, if we had had poll watchers at more places, at certain other places, we would have won.
So talk about the there were racial tactics in that campaign. Tell us about your opponent and how he campaigned. Webb Franklin, who was...
Yeah, well, Webb campaigned, he had, you know, lots of money to campaign. I had just enough to get ads. But, you know, Webb, so far as I'm concerned, I'm the kind of individual that we can have different philosophies and we can disagree, and I don't fall out with you and get angry with you. You know, a lot of folk did not turn out in some areas.
Now, why was that?
In some areas, well, frankly speaking, right here in Holmes County, down in the bed of the civil rights movement, I didn't get to turn out down there.
Was that because of the Eddie Carthan?
Yes.
Carthan was the mayor of Tula, and he was accused of a number of crimes.
Yes, sir.
And how did that play out into the election then?
Well, it played out into the election that I was not coming down and putting my arms around him.
You were essentially saying, you know, let the court system operate.
Yeah, that's right. That's
and
right.
there were some folk who didn't like that.
That's right.
Did you think that cost you the election?
That cost me the election. If the milestone had turned out the way they have turned out for me every other time I run, I would have won. Got 49% plus, just didn't get 50% plus.
Did you think you were going to win?
What you say?
Did you think you were going to win election day?
I wasn't sure. I never was. I was always, you know, curious. I wasn't sure.
Well, this election attracted national attention. And you're very charitable to Mr. Franklin, but I just found one of his campaign slogan, elect Webb Franklin, he's one of us. Now, what does that mean?
Yeah, well, that's plain, that's racism. That's racism, plain to the white folk.
I think another one was, do you know who I'm running against? That was another of his.
Well, that's another one, you know. But like I have, you know, dealt with white folk, and I work with them. All right, when I first attempted to run for Speaker Pro Tempore of the Mississippi Legislature, I did not run because there were some African Americans who was not going to vote for me. And I didn't want their grandchildren saying, Grandmama, Granddaddy, why you didn't vote for that black man? But the second time around, you know, I said, I am going to run. I'm begging you for your support and pleading with you for your support. If you don't support me, I'm running anyway. So out of 35 African Americans, I got 17 of the votes, but I got 87% of the total vote of the Mississippi House of Representatives. And I got those votes. Those men and women knew that I was black, and they saw that I was black, but they voted for me as a person,
Yeah.
and not as a white person, and not as a black person.
And you had established yourself, your credentials, and they respected you.
That's right. And during the time I was chairman of, the Speaker Pro Tempore, there was times when they tried to get me to spin in the red. See, I was in charge of physical affairs of the house. If you put the money in the budget, we'll spend it. But if you don't put the money in the budget, we will not spend it.
Just a quick word about your second campaign. You came so close in the first campaign for the House. 2 years later, you ran against Franklin again. What was different in that campaign? And talk a little bit about how that went down.
Well, the campaigns went very much the same. The second campaign that we were, we was better organized and we knew more about what we were doing. But the two campaigns went very much the same. There were several other farmers in the Delta that, tried to support me and tried to get the rest of the farmers to support me. But if the farmers of the Delta had supported me, I would have won, particularly the second election.
I remember that election, and some of us were thinking that what was working against you, that they identified you as being with the Civil Rights Movement, as part of the Civil Rights Movement.
Yes.
And then when you did have a black candidate eventually winning, why Mike Espy, why he was not identified with the Civil Rights Movement.
Well, one of the things with Espy, though, we had changed the district. We had changed the district when the Espy ran.
And it was a much larger black district.
Yeah, we had changed the population. The percentage of the population was larger. We had really given him a winnable district. You see, I really, so far as, if you're going to take Mississippi as black and white as it was then, with my district running all up into Winona and all into Webster County.
Well, they had gerrymandered that as soon as it looked like blacks were going to vote, so that this would not be an overwhelmingly black district. Then they made it an overwhelmingly black district, and of course that made it more difficult for Democrats to win in other districts.
That's
and
right.
This is what we're dealing with nationally now. Well, I was going to point out that after that you came back and you continued to serve with distinction in the legislature. In 1992, you were elected Speaker Pro Tem of the House, and in 2000 there were 35 black representatives in the Mississippi Legislature, and that represents some progress at least. But before we let you go, one thing we haven't talked about is your family. Tell us about your family.
Well, where do you want me to start?
Well, I mean, you were married in 1971, and you had two
Yes,
sons.
I didn't get married till I think I was 38 years old. I had a family here, my sister's children, and helped to educate them, and they're doing well today. As I said, my nephew that I raised here, he is a cardiologist specialist in California, and he was the youngest cardiologist at the time when he graduated from the University of Michigan. And my great-grandparents were slaves here, and they bought the place, and my grandparent was here. And my grandparent, as well as my parent, always taught me that I was somebody and that education was important.
And you taught your children the same thing.
And I taught my children the same thing. For example, that's my first wife's photo up there. Sometime it'd be 24 little boys out there. They'd be playing with different equipment that they had. but I had them to know that you are not any more than any of those little boys out there. But once they grow up, they're going to go one way, and hopefully you're going to go another way. But I tell them now, if you go the way I want you to go, I'm going to stick with you. But now, if you go the way you want to go, and they're going the right direction, you can be sitting on the big stove porch at Ebenezer. I'll wave at you, but you're going to have to get out and take care of your own if you don't.
Yeah.
And they both did it. And they both are lawyers.
Oh, wonderful. You have been on the scene for a long time. The final question I'm asking most of the people that we are interviewing is, what have been the most positive changes that have taken place in this state during your lifetime, and what pressing problems remain to be solved?
I'm hesitating, not because lack of words, but the main problem I see in the state of Mississippi right now, we need to eradicate political parties because we have government now by the party and for the party and not for the people. And you have government now. If this party is for it, and it's like that in Washington, this one going to be against it, and vice versa. And our political parties, as I see it, and I have a right to believe in what I believe in because I have been out there. Our political parties is our greatest hindrance in the state of Mississippi today.
Well, now, it's sort of like it is in Washington, too, isn't it?
It's like it is in Washington. If the Democrats want it and they're going to make the Democrats look good, we ain't going to be for it. If the Republicans want it, we ain't going to be for it.
So
And
what's the biggest positive change that has taken place in the state?
well, the biggest positive change that have taken place in the state is that, people are free, haven't much change taken place really since the civil rights movement. People are free to go where they want to go in any place they want to eat, and go to any motel you want to and stay. But the civil rights movement was great. It was great. We couldn't have been where we are today without the civil rights movement. But I'm afraid, and I'm working on it right now, that if we don't do something, history is going to record that for lack of leadership in Mississippi, all of the good works of the civil rights movement died. And I'm working on that right now.
Well, that is probably a good way to end, that Representative Clark has spent his whole life in public service, and he's not through yet. Thank you again for giving us your time. This has been a splendid time for us.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that was
This video raises questions, and I need for you to be extremely honest in the comments when answering them. And just so you know, I have 2 questions. Number 1, what are your thoughts about this video? Please share them in the comments. And number 2, who would you like to see me do a video on next? Now please be honest in the comments when answering these questions. Share this video with anyone you deem necessary. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.